housekeeping things to let you know about. You can access a number of handouts that we've prepared at any point throughout the session. Among those is a notepad-like breakdown of the slideshow that we're going to be following. So you can feel free to grab that now while I'm speaking, and if you want to print it off, it's a great opportunity to make notes, action items, things to follow up on, etc. Also there, we've put together a quick document that just highlights some of the major industry showcases that happen across Canada, as well as some of the bigger ones from the States that seem to attract a good Canadian presence, like Folk Alliance International, South by Southwest. And then we've also got all of the provincial music industry associations, which themselves have a lot of kind of one-off and different showcasing opportunities. So I encourage you to check that out. Finally, there's 3 articles that we've published in Canadian Musician in recent years that pertain to this topic, and just kind of some supplemental reading that'll help bolster that. On the same note, at the end of the session, you'll see a link to musicbooksplus.com, our sister company. We've isolated a couple of titles about showcasing and performance there, as well as some tips on how to make the most of your next webinar experience. Now, we're aiming to we'll probably be under an hour with the session. Halfway through, we'll open it up to some questions, and we'll take a few, namely those that pertain to something that Roland and I have covered or that are relatively timely. If we don't get to your question at the halfway mark, fret not, because at the end we'll open it up for a longer Q&A, and we can reach a little bit outside the confines of what we've presented thus far. But to start off with a question, I'm going to ask one on my own. I'm just going to launch a quick poll here to gauge who we've got joining us. And again, this helps us not only steer the content for tonight's session, but also for the future ones that we want to bring you with NWC webinars. So we'll take a few seconds here and let you just identify. Basically, we're looking at in which capacity you're involved in the music industry. I'll share these with you momentarily. Pretty heavy towards performing and recording artists right now, some behind-the-scenes songwriters. And if you don't see yourself represented in one of our general categories, please feel free just to hit other. And we'll close this up once we've had a few more people input. Okay. So here, I'll show this with you guys. So the majority of our attendees, as I mentioned, performing recording artists, a few songwriters. I mean, I like when it's nice round numbers like that. So there we go, hide those results. And here, before we get started, as I mentioned, Roland with BreakOut West, they wrapped up their 2016 edition mid-October in Regina, and I was out there. Terrific event, terrific conference programming, terrific showcases at some great venues across the city. Regina gets a bad rap sometimes, but my experience was pretty terrific. So we're going to give you a quick introduction to BreakOut West here, and then we'll get started with the presentation.
So we come to the open door, where they tell you about but put your minds together. And you know we're doing the best we can, 'cause when it comes to an end, you know it's all for the better. Walk to a rhythm, it's in the touch you need to be fully forgiven. I'm the sound of love, 'cause I can walk on the land, we can breathe underwater. And you think you can stand like the breeze in the winter.
BreakOut West is an industry conference, a festival, and a music awards show that all bring together artists from across the West, across the Western provinces and territories, and help take those artists to the next level, support career development, build their fan base, and celebrate music across the West.
There's plenty more to that video that breaks down the event that you can check out by going to youtube.com/Breakout West. That's the channel. Some wrap-ups from this year's event, plenty more content there for you. But in the meantime here, let's jump into Surefire Showcasing. Okay, so again, I'm Andrew King, Canadian Musician Magazine. In a moment, after some ado, I'll introduce Roland Deschambault, Conference Manager for BreakOut West. As you can see here, a little bit about Roland. Joined the team at BreakOut West leading up to the 2016 edition. Prior to that, many of you might know him from a professional development coordination role with Manitoba Music, which is where we first met. He's also a musician himself, manager, music director, all-around industry guru, as overused as that term is. And again, yeah, I edit some magazines, including Canadian Musician, and have spoken at a number of events, including several that Roland himself has put on. So, Roland, first off, thanks a ton for joining us, and are you ready to roll?
Thank you. Yeah.
Outstanding. So we thought we'd start, and I mean, there's a ton to be said for how to apply to showcase opportunities, how to target which type of events and opportunities might be best for you at your whatever stage of your career you're at. But we're going to kind of fast track that and focus on the showcase where you're playing for important people. So let's get started here. They've been accepted. And there's a few different types of showcases, you know, at a Canadian Music Week or something, there's showcases across the city. You're looking to kind of work for yourself to bring industry out. At some that, say, Manitoba Music would put on, it's a more targeted and captive room where the delegates have been put together for you. So I guess let's kind of start there. Tell us a bit about, you know, how you go about gauging what type of event you're playing, who's going to be in the room, and sort of tailoring your approach to that crowd.
Yeah, for sure. It's a bit of a tough question to start with because, as you had mentioned, a lot of like maybe the music industry association. So if we have some listeners from the West or from Ontario and across Canada, it's kind of different for every music industry association. But you sort of mentioned that they do have showcasing opportunities. So with those type of showcasing opportunities, you're basically playing to a captive audience. So there's industry in the room that has been, you know, are guests of the Music Industry Association. So you're playing to an audience who's there to watch a band. The big difference between a showcase or a show like that and, say, CMWs or South by Southwest or any of the other Canadian festivals, ECMAs, my own BreakOut West, you have no idea. And being, you know, from the music side of things as a musician and an artist myself, it's madness because you're putting a lot of preparation into hopefully playing for somebody. And that's the great thing about you know, a webinar like this, because, you know, we could sort of figure out together how you could increase your chances of getting industry in the room. Typically, it all depends on one of the most important things, as far as I'm concerned, is sort of understanding and knowing your audience. If you have the self-awareness and you know who your audience is, then you can start reaching out to certain types of industry. Or, you know, you can, if we're going just with the question, who's going to be there? Well, there could be managers, agents, publishers, media, music supervisors. It runs the gamut, indie labels, and it all depends, again, you know, on what it is you're looking for.
Mm-hmm. So let me give you a scenario then. I mean, in the case of
Sure.
a music industry association event where there's someone else kind of curating who's in the room, I guess one thing there is that if you're a member of that organization, speaking from experience, they're always after ideas for the type of delegates that you want to play for, that they're going to bring over. Because chances are, if it's someone that you're interested in, it's someone that other members of that organization who are playing the event may be interested in. So on that side, it's not totally out of your hands. Folks like Roland are there kind of inviting your input. But for the sake of this, let's pretend it is a Canadian Music Week or North by Northeast, where it's you and a few other bands maybe that you don't know playing a small venue, and you are competing for attention from the delegates that have been invited, that are crowding the city for this weekend. How do you decide, who you're going to target to try and invite, and what's the best approach to enticing someone at that level to actually come out, make the trip, and take a chance on what may be an unknown band?
Well, I think that maybe prior to launching straight in and starting to invite people, I would make sure that all of your social media is up to snuff, and you have the same bio on your Facebook, and all of your socials, all of your branding is a really solid representation of who you are as an artist, whatever genre you're in. You have the contact info correct on all of your social media. Assuming that's all in place, and I think maybe the easiest way to explain it would be creating a scenario. So maybe I'll kind of step outside my wheelhouse a little bit. For me, the type of music I like is I like metal, I like pop music, I pretty much like it all. I think that my least comfortable world would maybe be, let's say, folk music. Okay, you're a folk and roots artist or a band, and you've been accepted to CMWs. How do you start targeting now the people that you want to come to your show? Well, what I would do is I would look maybe more at everybody wants a manager, everybody wants a label, everybody wants an agent, and all of that's well and fine, but it's tough to just kind of point your focus in those specific areas. It's such a small little target market when you could really be reaching out to a larger audience. So an artist may be going to Toronto for the first time. Look at bloggers in the area, or smaller bloggers, or some of the smaller writers, or people who do radio shows at college campus community radio. Targeting those people, sending your music, sort of building that relationship, reaching out to other artists in the area that maybe are a little bit like you, and creep on their websites and find out where they're playing shows, and just start slowly moving into the area. I always think that maybe going on that, for the first time going to something like CMWs, I think it's more of a reconnaissance mission. In a lot of ways, I'm not sure that that's really the answer that anyone wants, but I definitely will expand on what I mean by that. But yeah. Going to a festival like that, it's almost like you want to go there and have one specific goal in mind. So this time when I go, I want to get to know all of the people who sort of work within my genre. That's artists, that's venue owners, that's managers, labels, all of them. And even a quick hello and things like that.
So, and I guess on the promotion side too, we're kind of talking, again, it depends on the room, whether it's an entirely captive delegate audience in a small intimate setting, or if it is the CMW type event, where you're trying to attract both industry delegates, but you also, in most cases, are hoping that a number of fans show up so that delegates can see you in your element. So in that sense, is there a difference between promoting a show where there may be industry out versus just trying to get bodies into a room for a regular late night rocker?
Well, Yeah, I mean, there is a difference. There's going to be a difference emotionally, definitely, because you're playing a show that in a lot of ways is it, you know, the artist or yourself is going to be thinking high pressure, right? It's not just like any other show. It is a show that could, you know, change the trajectory of what it is you're doing at that moment. But I do think that you should sort of look at it as any other show, and I don't mean just get up there and play it like a show you did, you know, nights before in whatever city you're from. I think that preparation is key. Um, in my opinion, an artist should be, and a lot of, you know, there are many schools of thought on this, but I think an artist, at least leading up to a showcase, definitely should be playing the exact same set. So you're getting to this venue, assuming that everybody in that room, by the time you're done, you want them to be talking about you. So you're not necessarily thinking about, oh yeah, there's that person from the, you know, that label or that manager standing at the back of the room. Just look at that room as if everybody is there to see you and just play your show. And the more you play that show leading up to the showcase itself, you're just going to play it exactly the same way. And you want to be incredibly comfortable. And that, you know, every rehearsal you do, if it's a 40-minute set, if it's a half an hour set, play that same 30, 40 minutes over and over every opportunity you get.
It led beautifully into our next slide here, which is, okay, so you've been accepted. You've got a 25-minute slot, 9 p.m. stacked between other bands. So you touched on this here. And actually, let me, I guess, kind of preface it with a bit of an anecdote. So I was at an industry event, 2 showcase bands, very different, both in front of industry. And each of them pulled out a cover. Now, in one case, it was a 3-piece rock band, and partway through one of their songs, they cut into "Living on a Prayer" by Bon Jovi, and it sounded like every bar band you've ever heard playing "Living on a Prayer" by Bon Jovi. And so I think like a few people are kind of scratching their heads of, you've got 20 minutes in front of these people and you're doing something that, well, bands across the country are doing at every dive bar or pub you can name. On the other hand, it was a more electronic band that pulled out How Bizarre, and I had to just look up that it's by OMC, kind of a one-hit wonder, and they totally retooled the song so that it you know, everyone knew it, but they're able to kind of show off how they made it their own. And on the flip side, I think it was something very attractive that a lot of the delegates kind of you know, were able to identify with, and it just did a good job of showcasing what the band was about, that they had a sense of humor, etc. So with this, you had said, you know, make sure that you're playing well-rehearsed songs and that you know the set inside and out, but how do you go about choosing the type of set you're going to play, considering A, it may be a shorter time span than you're used to, and B, instead of worrying about sort of the ebb and flow of a set, you're just trying to throw as many punches as you can to make a big impact?
I think that's key. Your last line there, throw as many punches as you can to make the most impact. You know, you have 30 minutes or you know, all of the events sort of vary between 20 and 40 minutes. Mm-hmm. I think that if you're playing you know, 2 shows a month before then, or 1 show a month, or you are playing in front of people, you can really get a good idea of what songs people are connecting to, and it's really important. I know maybe from a band scenario or a solo artist, it's a little more difficult because you're kind of paying attention to a bunch of things like, how is my band playing? Oh, you know, are they on time? Are they in tune? Are they singing in tune? Why isn't our equipment working? We should have checked that. I mean, there's lots of other things to check, to really be concerned about. But number one are the songs. And you can really see the reaction. If you're playing songs that people are connecting to, you'll know which songs to play. Mm-hmm. And I think that you know, people have probably heard this before, but coming into a showcase with a song that has been written and hasn't been road tested, you know, you wrote it a month ago or 2 weeks ago, and it's like your band or you're as an artist, you're super excited about it, and you want to play that. Well, it hasn't been road tested. You haven't had a chance to truly gauge people's interest in the song. So it's probably best to kind of stick with material that you are very comfortable with and that you know connect with people. As for covers, I think you know, excuse the pun, but you covered that pretty well. If you're doing a cover and you're making it yours, absolutely go for it. However, you don't want your cover to be the best song in the set.
Good point.
And that's the tricky part, and because most of the time you're doing that cover because it did connect with a wide audience on a global level. But if you can take, say, throw a Taylor Swift song, if you can rework a Taylor Swift song to kind of make it yours, you know, Ryan Adams did that with her last album, but the more rootsy version of really catchy melodies, you know, then go for it. But it's a really delicate thing, you know, to try and make that song, your song, stand out. And ultimately, that's what people are there to see and hear, is your songs. So it's very, very difficult to kind of make that call.
Right. So if I can sort of summarize, you're saying play it safe, not to a fault, but make sure that it's material that you know is going to hit hard, that you know
Yes.
inside and out, that you can perform flawlessly.
100%.
I asked here, what do you want to communicate? And again, drawing from an example, I remember a band that was midway through a set and kind of in between tuning had called out, you know, is this Live Nation agent here? And it was like, yeah, like, hey, I've been trying to get a hold of you for a while. Thanks for coming, kind of thing. And it was, I don't know, it was quirky banter. I'm not sure if it was effective or not, but that's why I asked, like, banter, the things that you're going to say on stage, maybe even just from things that you've seen work or not work, but like, how should an artist be behaving, conducting themselves, knowing that there are people there who they're trying to send a message to, and that message is probably pay attention to us?
Well, here's the thing. I think that most artists who, you know, here's the self-awareness thing again, who've played a lot of shows, I think know if they're good at banter or not. If you're not getting really good at banter takes a long time. You either naturally have it or you can grow into a great front person. I think, again, taking the safe route and keeping the banter really, really simple, unless there's got to be somebody that you can ask within the band or in your group of friends or the fan base you have now. Just ask straight up, like, hey, do you guys want me to shut up between songs? Like, as far as I'm concerned, and we may be jumping ahead here, and this may be a question for later, but I think a strong transition musically is going to be a lot more effective in a showcase than banter that's uncomfortable. Because I think we've all seen comedians who bomb. There's nothing more painful than watching a comedian bomb. And essentially, within, you know, the music atmosphere, it's sort of the same thing. You could play 4 songs in a row that are just smoking. You have put your best foot forward. The crowd is really into it. And then all of a sudden you take a break to introduce the people on stage, or you say a few things that really, you know, you're not communicating well into the microphone. People can barely hear you. Just assume a lot of the time you don't know what the sound person, the person doing your sound, you don't know that they have your vocals on top of the mix. It's very hard unless you take the time to speak slowly and clearly into the microphone to get your point across. So I would, if you have 30 minutes to showcase, I would say a hello at the beginning, and 30 minutes later, you're saying a thank you. and the name of your act, and maybe a shout out to your socials.
Spot on. So let the music speak for itself, and I guess the
I think
caveat.
so, yeah.
Yeah, unless you are one of the performers, and I can think of a few offhand where the banter, where the crowd interaction is a strong point and also
Yes.
part of any set. But for the most part, as a rule, you can be. Um,
Yeah, if you can answer the question, or our listeners right now, if are you strong at crowd interaction? If that answer is a hard yes, then go for it because you're comfortable and you know that that's part of your show. But if it's a maybe or a not too sure, just avoid it.
Bingo. Yeah. So condense what you normally do, play it safe, hit hard,
hmm
play confidently, and keep it to the music unless you've got a good reason to not.
Just sort of maybe jumping back to the covers really quickly.
Yeah.
I think it is, it's not a bad thing to have people, especially a room full of people in a different city, and we're using Toronto as an example, or CMWs. If you want to incorporate covers into your short showcase set, it's not a bad idea to maybe incorporate those covers as transitions between songs.
Mhm.
So if you have your first big opening song, you want to have a really strong song that people are connecting to, and bang straight into another one. So you're not stopping to tune. You can talk, or you can sort of tune on the fly, and then between song 3 and 4, uh, you transition. If you're playing that song in, say, G, uh, take a cover song that's based around that key that you're playing in, and sort of transition into your third song using a tune, maybe the music part of the song, not necessarily the vocal melody,
Mhm.
if you're a band, and give them a little something where it's like, okay, I'm here. I recognize what's going on. They're playing Run to the Hills by Iron Maiden, just the breakdown version, and they go into their own song. Like
Yeah.
there's ways to make covers work for you, and I think transitions is a really effective way to do that.
Right on. And actually, you had alluded to this earlier, and we've kind of been dancing around. But something else I just thought of is, the cover thing. If you're playing to a room and a lot of the delegates are people that are buying talent or booking bands for opportunities, they want to see what you can do as a live performer, as an entertainer. So,
Mm-hmm.
whereas, if it's lots of label types or folks that you're dealing more with on the record side, they're probably there more to hear your original music and whether it's good. And there's a lot of crossover there, but that goes back to knowing who's in the room and I guess kind of catering your performance to what end you're aiming to.
Yeah,
Yeah, whether it's someone looking
and
to buy a show or not.
I think that sort of goes into what we're dealing with now in the music industry itself. The revenue streams are more on the live music side of things than the actual sales, especially
Mhm.
earlier on. I think that you want to have the strong songs, but you also want to be able to communicate those songs to an audience,
Yeah.
and that audience is going to be made up of managers and agents and everything. An agent's going to want to see that you're going to be able to bring it live. A manager's going to want to know that you can bring it live, but you also have those skills to sell your product. And a label's going to want to make sure those songs are strong enough that they can sell it to the world.
Yeah. Okay. So we're on our next slide here. Before I jump into it, and this won't be a long one, but a few questions are trickling in. If you've got anything that you want to ask, you've got a little question field in your interface there, fire it off. That'll come to me and we'll put them in front of Roland. Um, but yeah, make it count. So what I've got here is, like you had alluded before to the sound techs at the venue. I was talking about you're at venue X with a 20-25 minute time slot sandwiched between two other bands where, there's going to be a venue or stage manager just looking to keep everything on it. So as someone in your position that I'm sure has done his fair share of running around from venue to venue to make sure things are running smoothly, kind of that time before an artist hits the stage to the moment that they do, interfacing with volunteers, with venue staff, sound technicians, just some general tips for how an artist can make sure that they're playing by the rules, on point with everything, and ultimately leave everyone around them with a good taste in their mouth.
Yeah, I think, being very, adhere to the time schedule. Don't be that artist or act or band that goes over their set time by 10 minutes, or you're never going to get a sound check. So just assume you're not going to get a sound check and use that 10 minutes to get the best possible sound you can. But before any of that, introduce yourself to the sound tech and be very, very, very nice to that person, because that's the person who's going to make you sound amazing or not, right? Usually it's a little different for showcasing, but I would definitely suggest advancing the show quite a ways out. So advancing a show for a showcase is going to be a little bit different because you're not necessarily talking to the venue, but if you can find out who the sound tech is at that venue, anybody you meet in this industry knows somebody else. So if you're that artist or act or band that they're talking about, it's like, oh, I met this artist from Alberta, from Calgary last night. Man, they were so amazing. Like it was a quick changeover. They were aware of their surroundings. They emailed me a month out to ask if there's anything that they should know. Where's the park? Where can they park? Is there like a specific load-in door? Who is the venue manager? Who, all of these kind of questions asking beforehand, because it's chaos, and you have to sort of have everything in place beforehand. You don't want to be looking for a parking spot like just 2 minutes prior to the show. You just want to be very, very respectful of other people's time and the other artists, because they're in the exact same position you are. They want to put their best foot forward and working hard. And I also think the most important thing you'll do at those shows is introducing yourself and hopefully building a connection with the other artists on that show.
Spot on. Okay, let's have them. I've got a few here. So this one's a bit long, but a good question. This gentleman plays in a genre that's, I guess, a bit left of center for what's more dominant in his region. There's showcasing opportunities regularly put on by the Provincial Music Industry Association. However, they tend to not come from the, we'll just say, metal world. Is there still value for a metal band playing a showcase in front of delegates that by and large are there from, say, folk or roots festivals? And with that, is there any way that artists can, work with the Music Industry Association to try and bring at least some delegates in that pertain to them, or at least better cater to some of those different genres?
Yes, absolutely. I think that it really comes down to relationships. Speaking as a former, employee of Music Industry Association, specifically Manitoba Music, I think I mentioned this earlier on, but my favorite types of music are metal. And for me, there is a real challenge with the industry. It's never, difficulties are never the artists as far as I'm concerned in that particular genre. It is a little more it is more difficult to get a typical showcase in those genres. Mm-hmm. So like maybe hard hip hop or electronic music and metal, and it's just different challenges than, say, like an indie rock band or country. People sort of, I think, maybe assume that there's more opportunities for those artists. Well, maybe on the outside, quickly looking in, perhaps you could say that. But I think that for artists outside of those sort of typical mainstream genres, to me it's more exciting because it's now up to those genres to kind of create their own opportunities, and those opportunities may not necessarily be showcasing, but to sort of fly back into the face of what I just said, as far as I'm concerned, if I go to a showcase and I see 4 bands or 4 artists, and all 4 of those artists are different genres with different points of view, that's a show as far as I'm concerned. I get to see something that's exciting in 4 different ways. So I don't think any artist should limit themselves by the genre they play. Just give it your all, because if you connect on a human and personal level, people will respond and they will connect with you. You might hear that thing like, well, I'm not 100% into the type of music they're making, but you have to go see this band because they are something special. Just make yourself stand out in different ways. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it was a tough one, and actually, this again comes from my experience. I'm just looking for your opinion here, but yeah, on our, well, I guess I can speak specifically here. I'm in PEI, was on the board for a while for Music PEI, and at our annual Music Week Awards gala one year, which is in a nice big stop seat theater at the Confederation Center, there was 8 or 9 acts that were performing, and this isn't really a showcase, but I'm just curious as to what you think. And there was a metal band kind of smack dab in the middle that did their thing, played a great track, but the room not really conducive to metal. The fact that everyone's seated and facing the stage, not really conducive to metal. And I was talking with the guys after, and they were totally good humored about it, and knew that there were politicians and grandparents and stuff there that probably would have rather been somewhere else. And I said, and we were just talking, and I don't remember if it was my idea or someone else's, but what about if you'd have, sat down, said, hey, we're this band, we're normally a lot heavier, and you can go check out our stuff at our website. We thought we'd do something a little different and do an acoustic performance or a collaboration with another artist that would probably go over better in that room at that time. What are your thoughts? I mean, because you're not really showing your true self, but as far as making that connection like you were talking about, there may be a better opportunity there.
Well, I think that working in within that scenario, my first instinct would have been, okay, fish out of water. We clearly don't fit with anything else that's going on this stage right now, but we're going to make it work for us. So maybe a trick, something I would do is, and of course, this is assuming the songs are good. So good songs, metal, electronic, hip hop, pop, country rock will translate in any way. So why not, for a metal band, say, turn down a little bit instead of having your amps crushing into the audience, turn them around and have them face the wall or cover it with a blanket, keep one of the speakers out, just play a little bit quieter. You're still going to have that energy. It's not going to be, if you're a well-rehearsed band and say you rehearse in your space and you're just always cranked at the top of your volume all the time, you've played those songs a million times. If you're going to play a show and say your monitors are terrible, or the drummer is not getting enough kick, or he can't hear, if he's working off a click, he's not hearing that right, or she, it's not going to matter, because you've played those songs so many times that you can play them and barely hear yourself and still perform very, very well. So if this metal artist is willing to maybe try that, turn down for a show just a little bit, and the songs speak for themselves. They don't have to be crushing. It's the melody that people want to hear, and within metal songs there is a lot of melody, and just sort of read the room. Or as people are walking in, here's an opportunity to meet everyone. Give everybody some earplugs. We're going to be loud. We're really sorry, but you know what? Here's some earplugs that we just really like. Hope you like the show. You know, like something endearing or.
Oh, well put. And thanks for following me down the rabbit hole. Thank you to Alan Willard from the AFM/CFM, Canadian Federation of Musicians, the union that covers, well, I'm sure some of the folks in our audience. I'm just going to read this direct because it is a good bit of advice, although I'll preface it saying, with what Roland and I are talking about, we're using the term showcase to mean any time that you are playing in front of music industry reps, whether it's a completely captive audience of industry professionals or the Canadian Music Week type shows where you might have 5-10 delegates in the back of the room that you're targeting, but where there may also be public. So just, I guess, sticking to the formal definition, the definition of showcase is a performance to a closed audience of buyers, agents, A&R reps, etc. Public is not allowed. If the public is invited, a la CMW, North by Northeast, and many of the opportunities we're talking about, it is technically a regular performance, thus the artist should be paid and should be covered by a union live engagement contract. If there's any recording from the event, it must be covered by a union media contract to provide additional fees and restrict what it can be used for. So yeah, we'll throw that in just as a clean, clear definition, but most of the tips that we're talking about would apply to either of those scenarios. Thanks, Alan, for always keeping us in check. And Roland, one more question before we move on that's based on that. Even though select showcases aren't necessarily open to the public, do you recommend that bands still promote the fact that they're playing it, even though fans can't attend? Does the fact that they're playing it, is that something that can boost fan engagement?
Definitely.
Or give the impression that, you know, the band is doing something promising?
Absolutely. I think that most of the people who are attending these showcases, so be it industry or people who buy a wristband to go see a show, know that they're checking out new artists to that market. So they're not going to walk in expecting a packed room, but there's nothing makes an artist or an act feel better than having, 5 to 10 people screaming. So if you have any friends in that market, or if you have family, or if you have uncles and aunts and cousins and distant relatives, get all of them to the show if possible, and just ask them a favor. Please clap and cheer after the tunes. It just makes you feel better, and you're going to perform better. And I mean, the industry is going to know that that's family and friends or whatever, but this isn't really about them. It's more about making you feel comfortable. I wanted to sort of quickly say something about, you had asked earlier what an artist can do ahead of the event to get industry to their shows. And I think, and you can probably speak to this as well, Andrew, most of the time the industry are making those decisions on what shows to go to on the spot.
Totally.
And they might have a working list that they're working on in the morning, and it's just like, okay, well, tonight I'm going to go see this band, this band, this band, this band. But then they do the conference stuff during the day. They speak on a couple of panels. They start talking to some of the participants, the people who are attending those panels. Maybe after somebody introduced them, they heard about a band. That's a huge opportunity. If you're going to showcase or any conference-based event, the conference is probably the best way to get people talking about you. And even just by attending and asking questions during the actual panels, and just a quick little introduction after the conference, just like, hi, I just wanted to say, a couple of things you set up there really resonated. I wanted to introduce myself, and boom, maybe that person's going to come to your show. I really do think they make those decisions at the last moment.
You're absolutely right. I don't commit to doing anything until I'm at the event, just to see which other delegates and who else is going to shows. At BreakOut West, there was only one night, one venue that I said ahead of time I had to be at, and otherwise I was just leaving it open for acts that I met. And that's a big one too, even for January music meeting, Manitoba Music, where we first met. I had a few artists, I can name all three of them, that wrote to me beforehand, said, hey, we see that you're coming, we're playing here, would love to have you out. And I went to those shows because we are always telling artists to take the initiative, to be proactive, so that when they do, you got me. And one more thing.
Surprising how much it works, eh?
Yeah, totally. Well, I just practice what you preach, and like I'm there to see new music, and especially check out acts that have promise. And if you're taking that kind of initiative to progress your career, chances are you're one of the folks that we're looking to check out. So
yeah.
We'll move on here. And something else I want to mention, we've talked a bit about genres here, and like we were just talking about a metal band as an example. Really, we're trying to cast as wide net as possible and offer tips that will help you do an effective showcase regardless of style. When we're talking specifically to metal or deep hip hop, it's more just to say genres that are a bit left of the mainstream or left of center. So that's essentially where we're going. Great question, Denise. I'll fire that at Roland at the end here. We'll keep rolling. Questions coming up at the end. Standing out from the pack. So I guess we've covered some of this already, but maybe drawing from your experience, some anecdotes. What makes for a killer showcase set? Any that you particularly remember? Maybe like unique things to incorporate, like the covers we were talking about. What makes an impact? What's really stood out from you from your showcasing experience in recent years?
Well, I think that, being honest with yourself, understanding what type of artist or group you are, playing to your strengths. I want to say energetic, big, and bombastic, but by saying that, it's sort of pigeonholes. It's like, okay, we got to play our loudest songs. We have to. No, it's more about being wholly yourself. Don't try something that you haven't done before. I've seen, an artist get up with just a piano or an acoustic guitar and bring down the house, and it's so powerful, and they're playing mellow songs for half an hour. But then I've also seen, 4-piece, really loud, bombastic, energetic bands do the same thing. I've seen MCs get up there. I've seen, so many different types of artists really bring the house down. And the one tie that binds is every single one of those artists knows who they are, knows what material is going to work, because that material has been tested on many audiences in many scenarios, and they're able to I guess go with the punches kind of thing, and just make the best out of what you have in that room. And I think that maybe the artists that are listening right now, they know what their strengths are, and it's a matter of just building on those strengths. It's what makes a killer set. 30 minutes of amazing songs, or if you're a killer musician, showing off those chops, don't be afraid to do that.
Like I had mentioned the How Bizarre cover that was really interesting and jumped on there. Any really unique ideas that you've seen an artist employ, maybe that was even risky for a showcase, that paid off?
Well, I think that some artists are able to pull off the yelling at the audience and really getting in their face, and calling people out if there's too much talking. Or I've seen people look in an audience and say, I know which one of you people are industry. I can tell because you're barely listening, or you're standing in packs talking to each other and judging us. Why don't you judge us after the show and enjoy it for now? Like, you know, that can go one of two ways. It either really works coming from the right person with the right charisma and delivery, or it is a complete fail, you know? I think the unique things to incorporate, I'll have to say it again, but I think I would love to see more people work on transitions between songs and less tuning time. Work on that during the songs. As you're ending a song, there's no reason why one of the instruments can't sort of pop out if they know they're the one who's starting the next song, tune at the end of the song prior, or, you know, having a drummer sort of play through a transition and allowing the band to kind of get themselves ready, and then boom. And that works in every genre.
Spot on.
Less sort of blank space or dead space, unless that's what you're going for. If you want to make a room feel really uncomfortable, then just have 3 or 4 minutes of silence between songs. Maybe that'll work for you.
Now, if I ever see that, I'm going to call you.
Yeah.
So this was actually a question, but probably, well, I was going to say the most important. The actual performance is probably the most important. But as far as anything else that's going to help make an impact, the follow-up. So I've got this divided. So let's say you've just played a set and you still, you know, you're in the room with all of those people. Yeah, maybe take this both parts. You're in the room with the people you've just played for. They know, they recognize your face. You can see who they are in delegate tags. What's effective follow-up look like in that scenario? And then, afterwards, if there are people you know are in the room that you didn't get to speak with for whatever reason, post-event, a few days later, what does effective follow-up look like in that arena?
Okay, so as soon as you're finished your set, thank yous. Obviously, thank the sound person, sound tech, thank the venue, because they'll really appreciate it. You know, shout out to the people behind the bar. Introduce yourself beforehand and thank them. Thank the attendees and let them know who's coming up next, and immediately strike the stage. So you're expected to clear your gear off that stage really fast because there's going to be another artist coming up immediately after you. But within that thank you, from the stage, I think being very clear in saying that we're just going to, you know, or quickly strike the stage, you can say that or not, but we're going to be standing over there at the door where our merch is. You can come, we'd love to say hi to you. Come over and say hi. And that way, because you can't just think of the showcase as playing for industry, because there's a lot of other people in that room who may or may not have enjoyed you, and the ones that do are now fans. So it's those fans that are going to give you a career. So you don't ever just walk off the stage and leave. If you're that type of artist, then I mean, I think that'll probably come across, that dark, foreboding kind of artist. Typically, an artist is going to want to speak to people after. So I'm at the merch table. Come and say hi. I'd love to meet you. And any industry, typically, if they did really, really enjoy the show, then they might not come over and talk for very long, but they'll quickly come over and say, hey, that was a really great set. Then they'll follow up, because they have all of your contact information on your website if it's really, really clear. And think about all of the people in that room, not just the industry. As far as handouts, if you want to give some cards, I think, you know, just simple. I don't think CDs or anything like that are all that effective. I do think that, you know, being clear from the stage where people can find you. Did you, before I move on to like the effective follow-up, like a couple of weeks later, did you have anything to add to that, Andrew?
No, I think you nailed it. And especially thank you for saying, I'm still a CD guy, but if you're handing it to me at 8 p.m., you know, on a night when you're venue hopping around Toronto, it is not convenient. So yeah, I'm with you. I think that people only have pockets, especially if it's a nighttime thing, and I'll just consider that. But no, otherwise on point for me. And yeah,
And I think that let's say this same band, we're talking about a band from Calgary going to Toronto for CMWs. If you have a showcase, nobody in Western Canada or Eastern Canada, they do that show unless you're posting to social media about that show. It may as well have never happened, outside of that building. So if you're working within a group dynamic, a band, or make sure there's somebody dedicating their time at that showcase to social media. And if that means, taking selfies with people in the room and politely asking them, hey, do you mind if we post this? It kind of gives the illusion that, because it's the illusion of success that sort of builds that buzz. So getting that stuff on your socials is incredibly important. Effective follow-up. So by that you mean reaching out to maybe the industry that you had spoken to?
Yeah, or that you didn't, but like post-event, there were some people that either you met at the show, during the show, or that you just knew were there, and you want to basically just not let that relationship fade.
Well, I think that I'm assuming you've probably had webinars on effective email techniques or social media for artists and things like that. But I think a very, very short email with a very strong subject line are the most effective. If you did speak to somebody at the showcase industry, and even if that's, say, the sound tech or the bartender or one of the serving staff members, they're just as important as anybody else, because you don't know who they know. They're a fan. If they had anybody who expressed interest in you as an artist, you're taking email addresses from all of them. I guess I probably skipped that part, but get as many email addresses as you can. Anybody who shows interest, get an email address or get a social media a tag from them, and then you follow up after, and sort of in your follow-up mention something about the scenario that you met them, like, oh, I remember when that person spilled their drink, or something that will have them remember the moment, because most of these people are going to see over the course of the weekend, 20, 15, 20 bands or artists or acts. You have to stand out, and that doesn't mean, I don't mean that, I'm not saying that to mean that you have to do something to enhance the situation. You want to be organic and be yourself, but just sort of refer to maybe something that you talked about, if it was interesting, just as a quick reminder,
Spot on. There we go. Open up for questions again, and I've got one to start with. First off, shouts out to reggae musicians across the country, keeping a beautiful form of music alive in a country whose weather is often very far from where that beautiful style of music originated. But with that, we didn't really cover the application process. We were looking at basically you have to play a show in front of some industry people. How do you do it and do it effectively? But I've got to ask, Roland, especially like with your background with both WCMA and Manitoba music. So we've got an artist joining us, well known, well decorated, several Juno awards to their credit. Reggae musicians that have still not been selected for some industry showcase opportunities. They mentioned a couple of very big ones. Thinks maybe they're missing something here. I guess the question is, how do you best reflect your credentials and your career trajectory to entice whoever it is adjudicating showcase submissions that you belong on that stage?
Wow, that's a big one. I think for any application, probably the most important part of it would maybe be the rationale part. And by that I'm saying, why would I want to show? Why am I showcasing at CMWs? What am I going to get out of this event? I think being very, very clear in that, you know, for some of those underrepresented genres, I don't look at it again. It maybe is more challenging when you're inside of that bubble, and it's like, okay, well, none of these festivals choose our type of music. Well, maybe a place to start would be calling the festival office yourself or sending an email and starting that dialogue, and like, you know, what are some of the things that we can do to strengthen our submission, or why is it that you know, acts like ours are often overlooked? Is there something we can do to build that audience? And it is in a lot of ways an audience or like-minded groups of people. I'm from Winnipeg, and on any given night, you will see a reggae band play with a, you know, any other type of genre. There's no real set genre. I think that a lot of the artists go to each other's shows, and that's the biggest support system. So perhaps going to see some other bands that maybe you think do typically get more of these opportunities based on the genre they play, go check out one of their shows, see if they're good. If they're good, introduce yourself. You know, like, it's amazing the opportunities an artist will get if your you know, other artists are talking about you.
Bam. No, well put. And actually, that might be a great future webinar, is zooming into the other side about applying for these opportunities, and basically how to make impact with your application, knowing who it is adjudicating them, what their end goal is. Because again, like with some of the Music Industry Association showcase events, they're trying to help their members, you know, propel their career, start exporting, ultimately turn them into taxpayers. So they're looking to augment your success with other festivals, like some that we've been talking about, where they're relying on ticket sales. They're choosing their artists based on some different criteria. So yeah, that makes it a tough question to answer, but also a very interesting one that maybe we should.
Well, you know, maybe thinking about it this way, with some of those more specific genres, the ECMAs, and I'll have to, like, you know, speak to the Western Canadian Music Awards here. We have, you know, there's hip hop genre, there's classical music, there's the metal genre, there's the singer-songwriter, there's all genres are covered. Francophone, Christian, or any type of music. So these festivals all have that component already built in. So most genres are covered in those areas. So now think to the rationale in your submission. I think album cycle is incredibly important when applying to a festival. If you put out an album a year ago and you're coming to the end of, typically album cycles are about 18 months. If you're, you know, 14 months into an album cycle, it doesn't really make sense for a festival to add you to the festival artists, because there are 10 other artists who are just in the middle of their album cycle, or they have a reason to promote that record because they're still working that material. So in that rationale, say you're an artist who is 14 months into an album cycle, you can say that we've never attended Canadian Music Week before. We would love the opportunity to showcase. We've been playing a lot. We recognize we're at the end of our album cycle, but we would love to go and, again, look at this as a reconnaissance mission. So whether we're chosen as a festival act or not, we are still going. And we're going to take in as much as we can and get to know as many people as we can, so we're guaranteed to be chosen next year when we put out our next release or we're on our next album cycle. It's sort of thinking ahead to those things, I think, are incredibly important, and showing that you are thinking about those things in the rationale in your submission.
That is some great advice. I hope that helps. Yeah, big thanks to Roland. In front of you here, if you go to musicbooksplus.com/showcase, a couple of titles that, again, just kind of build on some of the things we've talked about, including Tom Jackson's Live Music Method, Tom Jackson Live Performance Coach. You've probably seen it at a number of the events we're talking about. And he wrote one of the Canadian musician features that you can access for free on your handouts there. So jump on that if you can. And here we go. We appreciate you joining us. In the next 24 hours, you'll get a follow-up email that basically says thank you, and we'll link you to a recording of this session that you can access at your convenience. You can also share it with your friends or industry contacts if you think they'll find value in it. nwcwebinars.com is where all of our previous totally free sessions are archived. You can check them out, everything on landing a record deal to whether or not you should be considering hiring a manager, to getting your songs placed in TV and film, to getting your songs on the radio. Dozens, well, not dozens, but many more. And there will be dozens soon. Keep an eye on the site. We've got more coming at you. Roland Deschambault from Western Canadian Music Alliance, BreakOut West 2017 happening in Edmonton.
It is, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, keep an eye there if you're in the Western provinces/territories. And even if not, it's a killer event with some great music, as this Maritimer can attest. Thank you all for joining us. The survey's coming around shortly. We appreciate your input on this and all of our other sessions. Hope to have you back. Huge thanks.
And by all means, I'm easy to get a hold of. Just Google BreakOut West. If anybody has any questions, feel free to email me. I'd be happy to chat or reply to an email.
Oh, bam. That goes for us too. aking@nor.com.